So I wanted to give a somewhat more substantial introduction of myself. That's not Buddhist teaching. That's not the point. But I do want you to have some concept of where I'm coming from, so you know who we're talking to tonight. And hopefully that also can like give you some little crumbs of information about me that you might want to ask more about later. So my name is Giun. This is my Dharma name, obviously. The two kanji characters, which translate to something like good cloud. I'm the head monk and a resident Dharma teacher at New York Zendo Shoboji in Manhattan on the Upper East Side. And my temple is one of two practice centers that belong to the Zen Studies Society. So my Sangha is called the Zen Studies Society. We've been around for, legally the organization is older than this, but we've had physical centers for 55 years. And so one of our practice centers is the City Temple in Manhattan, where I live. The other one is a training monastery in the Catskills in upstate New York, and that's called Daibosatsu Zendo. So a little bit about my Buddhist initiation, let's say. My first exposure to Buddhism at all was in college, in undergrad. I grew up in a Roman Catholic family. My parents are still pretty involved in their Catholic parish. As a youth, I was fairly engaged with that, fairly enthusiastic about it. But I stopped going to church when I was like 21. And at the same time, as part of my theology major, I was taking a survey course in Buddhism, and I got pretty interested in that. For me, at the time, it was very important that Buddhism had this method, a meditation method that you could try. You could engage with the method, and you didn't have to show up saying, I believe this or that. There was no creed that was sort of like a gateway, let's say. So the accessibility was important in that way. I feel like including this. I remember a moment in one of the classes in this Buddhism 101 class. We were watching a video, which I like to imagine led to my first Buddhist insight. So we were watching this video about a traditional pilgrimage around Mount Kailash, which is in maybe Nepal or Tibet or on the border somewhere in that region. And there are a number of faiths which have this tradition of circumambulating around the mountain. And some of the people who do this do it in the form of full prostrations. So they're standing up and they're doing a whole prostration here, coming down onto the ground, and then coming to where their fingertips were and doing it again and working their way around this mountain in the Himalayas like that. And it takes weeks. And I remember seeing this in the documentary and thinking to myself, wow, that would be a cool thing to have done. And in my head, it was in the past tense. And instantly I thought, wait a minute. I bet the people who are doing it don't look at it that way. I bet the people who are doing it feel grateful to be doing it while they're doing it. Somehow for me, this was some kind of a shift about how I looked at things. Fast forwarding a little bit, my Buddhist practice, so I got interested in college. In college, I started trying to meditate a little bit on my own based on instructions in books. I don't believe that we had a Buddhist association there at the time. And I kept doing that, and it kept getting a little bit more important for me over some years. My practice got a lot more serious the first time I visited our training monastery in the Catskills. So at the time I was living in Seattle. I was practicing a little bit with a Zen temple there, not all that much, honestly, but a little bit. I told the head priest there that I was interested in some kind of residential practice, and he told me, well, there's this monastery, Daibosatsu Zendo in New York State. They do 3-month training periods, a kesse, it's called. And this was sort of a golden opportunity for me because you could go for a 3-month kesse, and during that time you were living the same life, doing the same things as the monastics. So you're sort of like a monk for 3 months, but then you could leave if you wanted to. And that was exactly what I wanted. So I show up there. This was the fall of 2005. I did my first kesse there. And I came back the next spring and was there for another 3 months. And then it felt right. It felt like these people, this practice was addressing the fundamental challenge of human life. I know that I will die. I don't want to. What about that? And so eventually I asked to be ordained, and I was ordained in 2008. I lived at the monastery as a training monk for a total of about 4 years, not all consecutively, but 4 years in the end. And then after that, moved into the city temple where I'm at now in Manhattan. So my wife and I live there now. We've lived there since the beginning of 2019. And my title is a little bit hard to pin down, but either I'm the head monk or resident Dharma teacher or something like that. Head monk sounded very silly the whole time that I was the only monk living there. There are now 2 of us. So, I skipped the fun part. So I was saying the fundamental challenge of human life, right? That we face life and death. In the Zen school, we sometimes say that to practice Zen is to clarify this great matter of life and death. And then sometimes we take it like a notch more precisely and say the great matter, life, death. Not 2 separate concepts, not 2 separate realities. One thing, life, death. And to me, it felt like, what could be more important than that? What could be more relevant? So this kind of kept pulling me in until now. Okay, last bit. So last month in January, I was recognized as a junior Dharma teacher in our community. This, just so you know, that's where I'm at. And so I apologize that what you hear today is junior Dharma. That's the disclaimer. So moving on to a different kind of topic, what I wanted to talk about mainly is the practice, how we do the sitting practice, specifically how we approach that from a posture perspective. This is pretty basic. It's not that exciting, but I do think it's something that our community takes relatively seriously. I could be wrong, but my sense is that our community takes physical sitting posture a little more seriously than a lot of other American Buddhist communities. And that's neither good or bad. But since it's something that we're kind of good at, and for our daily sets every day, we're sitting really still and really silently for 45 minutes, I thought maybe I could share a little bit of that with you. And it's broadly applicable, whatever you're doing in your meditation practice, having a good sitting posture is helpful. So I'm going to launch into that unless there are great objections. So you all sat quite well when we were sitting together for a few minutes, relatively still, relatively quiet. I'm impressed. And has anyone had the experience of trying to sit for longer periods, like sitting for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, longer than that? How does it go? Can you do it? Yeah?
It goes, but either foot falls asleep or like hip starts to like freak out. Mm-hmm. Back starts to rattle. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about that stuff. I wish we had more props, as we were talking about before, but we're going to do what we can with what we have. So I'd like to set up all of you in a sitting posture that would count as acceptable for our community. So basically that means we've got 3 options. You could be sitting on a chair, you could be kneeling, or you could be sitting cross-legged somehow, right? So we're the richest in chairs, so let's start with chair posture, okay? So if you're able to grab a chair, and we'll set up at least one totally acceptable posture option for everybody using chairs. Don't be shy. Take the chairs. They're there. Get them.
You want to take this one?
Yeah, roll yourselves over a little bit so that we've got room for these two people over here. So the tiny Dharma talk that's included as part of this posture lecture is the following. As we're practicing Buddhists, we're trying to become enlightened, right? That's the thing. And more or less, we tend to think of that as some sort of a state of mind, a quality of mind, right? So how do we do that? Where are the adjustment dials for the mind? How do you set it to enlightened? How do you make that happen, right? Or I could ask in a more basic sense, like, can you show me your mind? Can you control your mind? What can you do? Because if you can tell your mind, be enlightened now, by all means, do that. Cut straight to the chase. But it's difficult, right? When we try to make our minds do things, either it only lasts for a second, or it doesn't quite happen at all, or something, right? So I claimed a minute ago that life and death are not really two, that it's just one package, life, death, one seamless experience. What if I claim further that body and mind are not really two, that they also come as one unit, body, mind? They're not actually separable, right? I would claim that everything that happens to the body affects the mind, and vice versa. Everything that happens to the mind affects the body. So this gives us an interesting inroad to influencing the mind by manipulating the body. Because the thing about the body is that we can make it do things, right? We can choose to do all kinds of physical things, like I can stand up. There, I've done it, and you can see that I did it, and I can tell that I did it. And I can sit down, and you can see that I did it. And so it's much more objectively verifiable what you're doing with your body, right? The mind is slipperier, hard to get your hands on, in a very literal sense. So also, what we do with our bodies affects our state of mind, and I don't think I have to work very hard to convince you of that, right? So if I sit like this feels different, mentally and emotionally than sitting like this. You can all try it. It's true. So arranging the body in a particular way kind of helps to lead the mind along a particular path, or lead the mind into a certain sort of quality of being. And I would go a tiny bit further and say the breath specifically is a really fascinating borderland between the unconscious mind and the conscious mind, right? Because 90-some% of your life, your breath is happening without any conscious involvement. It's doing itself unconsciously, but you can control it consciously. You can check in and say, I want to inhale, I want to exhale. You can control that, you can intervene. And also, the breath is very deeply linked to some of the most basic regulatory systems of the body. So, depending on the quality of the breath, we are leaning toward the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight response, where if you're sort of getting antsy and trying to suck in air and getting ready to do something physical, you become more aroused and more sort of amped up. And the reverse is also true if we breathe in a certain way. If we breathe more deeply and with an emphasis on the exhalation, we lean into the parasympathetic nervous system, where you're involved in more calmness, more healing, more steadiness and rest, okay? So if we deliberately adjust the breath with the conscious mind, we can change very subtly, very deeply, how the body is regulating itself, which then in turn affects how we feel emotionally, psychologically. Everything about our sense of being shifts, right? So, I brought the book. I might as well read the tiny excerpt. I've been reading this book, The Body Keeps the Score. I think it's great. I want to read you a teeny bit about the relationship between breath and physiological regulation. So, Kolk says, the autonomic nervous system is our brain's most elementary survival system. Its two branches regulating arousal throughout the body. Roughly speaking, the sympathetic nervous system uses chemicals like adrenaline to fuel the body and brain to take action, while the parasympathetic nervous system uses acetylcholine to help regulate basic body functions like digestion, wound healing, and sleep and dream cycles. When we're at our best, these two systems work closely together to keep us in an optimal state of engagement with our environment and with ourselves. When we inhale, we stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, which results in an increase in heart rate. Exhalations stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, which decreases how fast the heart beats. In healthy individuals, inhalations and exhalations produce steady, rhythmical fluctuations in heart rate. Good heart rate variability is a measure of basic well-being. When our autonomic nervous system is well balanced, we have a reasonable degree of control over our response to minor frustrations and disappointments, enabling us to calmly assess what is going on when we feel insulted or left out. Effective arousal modulation gives us control over our impulses and emotions. As long as we manage to stay calm, we can choose how we want to respond. Individuals with poorly modulated autonomic nervous systems are easily thrown off balance, both mentally and physically. Since the autonomic nervous system organizes arousal in both body and brain, poor heart rate variability, that is, a lack of fluctuation in heart rate in response to breathing, not only has negative effects on thinking and feeling, but also on how the body responds to stress. Lack of coherence between breathing and heart rate makes people vulnerable to a variety of physical illnesses, such as heart disease and cancer, in addition to mental problems such as depression and PTSD. So, this is just my long way of saying, setting up the body and the breath in a deliberate, specific way gives us some kind of access to the quality of our mind, to the quality of our sort of overall physiological regulation. Okay, so that said, what about meditation specifically? When we're meditating, you could say that we're trying to minimize unnecessary stimuli so that we can pay all of our attention to the activity of our mind, all of our attention to what is going on right now, so that we can have as little going on as possible so that it is possible to pick out what is going on and understand what's happening. So to minimize stimuli, we want to be able to sit still. We want to be able to sit quietly. We also need to be able to sit awake, physically alert, so that we are conscious and we are paying attention to what's going on. You can be calm and still and fall asleep, and that's nice, but then you don't learn so much. So the best way to balance this usually is an upright sitting posture, right? You can meditate lying down, but it's easy to become drowsy. You can meditate standing up, but it's kind of harder to stay still that way. So we tend to do a sitting posture. In our community, at least, there are three postures that are workable. One is chair posture, which we're trying out first, and then kneeling postures, and then cross-legged postures. There's not a best posture. It's about finding a posture for your own body that lets you sit relatively still, relatively comfortably for a period of time. So, two parts that are important. One part is grounding and support so that your body weight is supported. Another part is balance or poise so that you can relax as much as possible and still stay upright. So it sounds kind of dumb to say out loud, but I can't set up a good posture like this. I can hold this together with the grit and muscle for a few minutes, but I can't relax, right? If I try to relax, I'm gonna end up on the floor. So I do need to be balanced. All right, so let's check in. I'd like everybody to be sitting on the front edge of the chair. I'll talk more about why in a moment, but move yourself literally as far forward as you can on the chair. The back of the chair is purely decorative for Zen purposes. And just bring yourself up to sitting gently upright. You want both of your feet to be flat on the floor. Have your ankles pretty much directly under your knees so that your shins are pretty much vertical. You're sitting on the front of the chair. And here I'd like you to check in with part of your anatomy. So most of your weight here is resting on the two so-called sits bones, the two knobs of bone at the base of the pelvis. So that's where most of your weight is resting. You don't really want your weight resting on the fleshy part of your butt if you can help it. It should be kind of directly supported by the skeleton if possible. And then again, you don't really want to be slouching. You'd like to be sitting up relatively straight. And you'd like your shoulders to be back and down. It can be fun to shrug your shoulders up and kind of roll them backward and let them gently sink down. Your hands will be in your lap somehow. There are at least 3 good options. A simple option is just to put your palms on your thighs and forget about it. This is fine. You could also make the cosmic mudra, which is this with your hands, one set of fingers on top of the other, thumbs gently touching. This is a very classic Buddhist posture. In our school, the Rinzai school, it's also typical to do this. Sort of stick out one of your thumbs, grab it with your other hand, fold your hands in, set this here. Hand posture, not so important, just as long as your hands can stay still. Ultimately, you'd like to be able to forget about them completely. This is good. How do we feel so far? Look plausible. Since we have chairs, let me talk about adjusting the posture in chairs. And the following adjustments will be true for any of the postures that we take up. So for part of this, I'm going to turn sideways in the hope that you can see my back a little bit. The most important postural adjustment has to do with how we are rotating the hips and what relationship that has to the lower back. So I'm going to come at this 2 different ways because it is important. So first, let's try doing this wrong on purpose for the sake of experiment. So first, tip the hips backward. Just tilt your pelvis backward, 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 backward. And then you get this big slouch. And this doesn't feel right, does it? So that's not what we're going for. Okay, but we know what that feels like. Now let's take it the other way. So now tip your hips forward, roll your hips forward, and eventually you come to kind of a limit, right? I come to a wall where I can't roll my hips forward anymore without lowering my torso. And for me, this feels like I'm putting as much pressure as I can on the lower back. I've got sort of as much swoop in the lower back as I can really expect to have. It feels maybe a little too tense. So I'd like to back off of that just slightly. So from this limit, just imagine your tailbone dropping very slightly, a little bit. And then you get to something that might feel like an okay compromise. You might feel balanced, all right? Okay, so the second way to come at this is by looking at it from the perspective of the lower back muscles. So I'm talking about the 2 bands of muscle on either side of the spine, right above the hips. The first thing to try by way of experiment is what happens if I completely relax those muscles? What happens if you completely relax those muscles? Just let everything go. You get like this, okay? Sort of a sense of, oh, I'm on the couch, I'm watching TV, right? Okay, so that feels that way. In contrast, what if you put a little bit of grip in those muscles, not so much that it hurts or it's tense, just enough so that you get sort of a sense of lift, okay? Do you feel some sense of energy in the posture with a little bit of sitting up lift action? That's what I'm going for. It's this sense of, oh, I'm awake, I'm here, I'm ready, okay? That's probably the most important upper body posture adjustment. The other upper body adjustment to talk about, it has to do with the neck. So turn the other way for fun. So here, most of us modern human beings, when we sit down and we're not thinking about it, we tend to kind of project our skulls a little bit forward of what would be an ideal sitting posture. So for most of us, it's helpful to take the chin and just tuck the chin straight back. almost like the chin is like a drawer and you're just closing the drawer. Okay? So as you do that, you might feel a couple of things. As you tuck the chin backward a little bit, like an inch maybe, and you might feel that the back of the neck is slightly lengthening. You might feel that the crown of the head is gently reaching toward the ceiling. Okay? Yeah, this looks good. So we're just going for an alignment. We're going for aligning the cervical spine, the neck spine, with the rest of the spine coming down through the back. And with luck, this gives us the best chance of relaxing the body and still having the body be well balanced and upright. Okay? So everybody looks okay, and I want to give us this check mark, like this is a workable meditation posture. This can work. One last note before we leave chair posture, there's another sort of anatomical checkpoint to check on, which is it's very good to have the ball of your hip joint higher off the floor than your knee joint. So for me, this chair and my body, this is okay. I feel I'm well enough poised like this. But if you're taller, you might want to sit higher. And you always can. You just have to put something else under you. So if I take possession of this cushion momentarily, I can always throw this on top of my chair, and then I'm a little bit higher up, and maybe that makes me feel better poised, depending on your proportions. Okay. I just want to stress this for all the postures. Depending on what props you can get your hands on, you can always sit higher or lower. It's just a matter of adding or deleting gear, right? And you don't know until you try whether sitting higher or lower is going to be more comfortable. Okay. So I'm gonna talk briefly about sitting cross-legged and kneeling postures. We don't have the props for everybody to do it, so this is going to be quick. But at home, maybe you have some stuff you can use. You can do zazen in a kneeling posture, right? The simplest way is just like this, no cushion, no nothing, just sitting on your own heels. If this is comfortable, this can work. You might find that it's not comfortable. You might prefer to have a cushion, maybe take the zafu and stand it up on its side like this, put it between your knees, sit down on it like this. So now I'm a little higher up. That can be nice. You might want to take 2 of the zafus or 2 of some other cushions, stack them up, and have your legs on the outside sitting on top of the stack. That can be good. And we don't have any tonight, but there are also little wooden benches that are made for kneeling meditation, where you get a little bench, and then usually that goes on the outside of your ankles. Your legs are together like I am now, and then you're sitting on the bench. That can be good too. Okay. The kneeling postures are all guaranteed to give you good contact with the floor. You really don't need to worry about your support structure in the kneeling postures. It's built in. You can't ruin it. And finally, talking about cross-legged postures a little bit, since I have my robes on, I'm a bad body model for this. Does someone want to be the body model for cross-legged posture, especially if you're able to do like half lotus or quarter lotus or? All right, knock us out. So this will be fun. So just sit yourself in the middle, and we will try to get you into a couple of cross-legged postures.
Okay. Should I sit sideways? Sideways.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. You're in the middle of the circus. So there are 4 variations of cross-legged posture, and I'm gonna pretend my arms are my legs to try to model them. So the most simple one is sitting here with both ankles on the floor. Yeah, like that. This is called Burmese posture. Both ankles on the floor, either ankle in front. This is fine. Okay. The next tightest one is quarter lotus, where I've got one of my feet on the floor and the other one is up here on top of the opposite calf muscle. Yeah, like so. Good. And then if you can go a notch tighter, then the foot comes up on top of the thigh muscle. This is half lotus posture.
I don't know about that one.
Yeah. No, if you can't do it, don't do it. That's fine.
Like this goes up.
So if you had your left foot up on top of your right thigh, or vice versa, one foot on the other thigh, that's half lotus.
Something like that.
Yeah. And then, so the final one, the most difficult to get into is full lotus with both of the feet on the opposite thigh, okay? Again, there's not a best posture for everybody. All I want to say about the cross-legged postures is kind of two comments. One is, and this is the important comment, the cross-legged postures depend on this tripod structure to be stable. So you really do need both knees to be contacting your floor or the ground or whatever you're sitting on. Otherwise, if one of your knees is up in the air, this is suddenly not a stable posture. Suddenly this is a wobbly posture and you're not well supported. So I do see a lot of folks who are relatively new to the practice. They want to sit cross-legged because they've seen people do that or something, but they don't have the hip flexibility to get both knees on the floor. And so they're sitting with their knees up and they're kind of just wobbling around. And it's very hard for them to sit still, sit steadily. If you have this condition, but you're still interested in pursuing cross-legged posture, the simplest thing you can do is just raise your hips higher off the floor. Get another cushion, get a taller cushion, sit higher, and that gives you a different angle that might bring your knees down to the floor. Maybe, maybe not, but it might. The other comment about cross-legged posture is just, if you sit that way over a period of time, know that all the cross-legged postures put a little more tension on one leg than the other. And so you do want to switch from period to period, which leg is on top or which leg is in front. You don't want to slowly get stronger on one side of your core than the other side, okay? Does anyone have any questions about what I've said so far? Yeah.
So if there's no good sort of like ideal posture, it's different for everyone, then what's the point for the 4 different cross-legged postures? Like, why is there a half lotus, quarter lotus, full lotus?
Why indeed? All right, there's no one best posture, but a lot of people who can sit in full lotus will say that there's an undeniable energetic quality of that posture that is useful. I feel this way too. I sit full lotus most of the time on a daily basis. For one, your feet are locked in, so you can't move without taking the posture apart completely. So if you're in an environment where you're supposed to be sitting still, you're gonna until you stand up. That's something maybe. Also, something about the posture, it sort of forces you to sit up. It seems to generate some energy, and then you can work with that energy. But that is only of any use to you if you can sit that way. If you can't do it, then it's irrelevant. And I can also assure you that good meditation can be done in any of these posture styles.
How do you adjust during your sit? Because I feel like whenever I do adjust, I leave my state of concentration.
Yeah. So in our tradition, basically you don't. You commit to your posture and you stay in it, which can be uncomfortable. If you have to adjust, the best thing you can do is try to go as directly as you can from one posture to another workable posture and get back in it with the second posture. So like, if I'm sitting half lotus and my foot has fallen asleep and it's miserable, I'm just gonna try to like bring it down into Burmese.
I guess I'm more so asking about bad posture.
Yeah.
If you drift into bad posture, like if your back starts to round, like
Okay.
you immediately snap into.
Okay, yeah. I wouldn't try to like do anything sudden. I would try to make a slow, steady move into a better posture, being very aware of the breath all the way. So trying to use the breath, what does that mean? Trying to use the breath to sort of slowly set yourself back into a better back posture. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah.
For the first meditation, we focus solely on the out breath. Is that just to engage the parasympathetic nervous system, or is it like why wouldn't we focus on the incoming breath and the outgoing breath? And how, like, for me, I'm aware of both.
Yeah.
Like, am I ignoring the in breath and only focusing on the out breath, or?
This is a good question. Why do we focus on the out breath? from a physiological perspective, it helps us to be calmer. But that's not really what Zazen is for. It's really for something a little different. We focus on the out breath for a variety of reasons. What can I say? The best thing I can say is that over time, that emphasis on the out breath helps to bring us to the state of mind that we're aiming for. We're not completely ignoring the in-breath. We are still following it, still attentive to it. It's just that the in-breath is natural. We're not modifying it. And I'm obviously talking about what we do in our school. There are a lot of techniques out there, and other ones of them are also valid, but the one we use. I'm deliberately elongating the out-breath and then letting the body breathe in naturally. So more of the focus of the attention is on the out-breath, but I'm still attentive to the in-breath. I'm just not trying to control it, just letting it happen. So I did kind of want to come to that next. I gave you very brief instructions at the outset about this breath counting technique that we use, Susokokan, where you count 10 out breaths. What I didn't say was, what are the breaths like? So the breaths are like, so the out breath is gently, but it's a lot longer than the in-breath. The in-breath is relatively short. And if the counting is happening, it might sound like this is silent in your mind, but it sounds like just going on like that till 10.
Does it make a difference if we breathe in and out through our mouth and nose, or is there a specific way that we should?
For us, the mouth is gently closed and we're breathing in and out through the nose. Yeah.
And then one more. How do you sit like that? Is that just getting used to it, like until like the pressure on the ankle and the ankle gets stronger and it gets used to it, or is it just always gonna hurt to sit like that?
It's all of the above. For no good reason, I came into this practice being flexible enough to sit full lotus, being flexible enough to sit in seiza, kneeling like this without immediate amazing pain. And also I've been doing it for a long time, and I was expected to sit still on the floor like this for a long time. I can sit like this with no cushion for like maybe a half hour before it starts to get bad, depending on the surface. And that's not, what is the value of that? You know, there's no pride in that really. It's just, it's been useful to me, I guess. The point is, if you can sit still, that's your best chance for the mind to settle. That's your best chance for the mind to get really still as well.
I have an issue when I'm meditating that like I have an accumulation of saliva in my mouth. I have to swallow it.
Yeah.
And that kind of messes me up.
Yeah.
Even tips on how to get that.
I can say a couple things. So if we get pretty detailed in the posture instruction, the tip of the tongue is gently touching the soft palate, the roof of the mouth. So the tongue is kind of gently straight up, gently touching there, which can help regulate the saliva production. What you bring up is pretty common for people at some point in their early practice. Like, yeah, I have lots of saliva. I feel like I have to swallow all the time. It's distracting. I think for almost everybody, it goes away eventually. If you just kind of ignore it, you know. It's like one of the many things that your body does to try to get your attention. And if you don't make a big deal out of it, eventually it just kind of fades away. You know, in the meantime, you can swallow quietly and keep going.
Yeah, it wasn't an issue. Not at all.
Yeah.
I had a question.
Yes.
Whenever I meditate, like I really focus on with my eyes, and it like starts like hurting my eyes sometimes when I go into like that state of conscious or whatever, like when I'm focused. Is there any way that I could like not feel that pain behind my eyes?
You're focusing on them deliberately?
When I close my eyes, yeah, like I see like the light and like
Ah,
I try to focus on that
okay.
and it gets me into like the zone.
Okay. I'm not used to using that as a focal point, so I'm not so familiar. What we're doing usually in our school is, kind of tuck the chin back, and that lowers the gaze, and then I'm sitting like this, so my eyes are sort of half open, and they're not focused on anything. I'm not sure.
I'll try like not closing my eyes entirely. Maybe that'll change.
I think it's going to be a different experience, but it is an option.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Our main danger is running over time. I want there to be time for open Q&A about anything. I also want us to have a chance to do a little bit more meditation together. Do you want to do like 5 minutes sitting? And then we can end with whatever questions pop up at the end?
Sure.
Okay. I'll probably do this again. Grab cushions if you want them. Set yourselves up in a comfortable sitting posture.